On behalf of our team at RDIC, we would like to welcome Denise Kennedy, an Indigenous language instructor with Pasqua First Nation. Denise will tell us all about her occupation as a teacher, her educational pathways, and the rewards of her career. After you watch this presentation, we encourage you to complete the student survey found on our website at www.rdiec.ca to be automatically entered for a $50 gift card drawn at the end of every month. Again, we would like to thank Denise, as we know her presentation will help students in their quest to make informative decisions about their future. Take it away.
Minawapan. Denise Kennedy, Indigenous Pasqua Donchi. Nichigen Damamai again. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be part of this. My presentation is called Nakwewin Gananakame, which means language, my language, which is Soto, teacher. So a little bit about myself. My name is Denise Kennedy, like I said. I'm a wife and a mother, first of all, above everything. I'm married to Jay Kennedy, and I have 4 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. And they're the reason why I do absolutely everything in my life besides my students. So I'm just gonna go through what brought me up into being a language teacher. So, so when I started, I went to school at Fort Capel, Fort Fox Community High School. And then some things happened when I was a teenager, and I left school for a little while. And I actually got my adult basic education through Parkland Regional College in grade 12. And I find it very important for me to let people know that, because sometimes we do have hardships when we're in school, in high school, and sometimes things happen, and that you could still go to school, you can still get your ABE 12, and it is still something, even if we don't graduate from the regular school system. With a lot of work, of course. So, and then right after I got my AB 12, I think I was 19 years old. I headed out to First Nations University of Canada, and that's where I got a double major in Bachelor of Arts with Indigenous Studies and Soto Linguistic Studies. So that's kind of where my career started off. Of course, it was all new to me. When I went to First Nation University, I started to learn how to read and write in the standard Roman orthography. And that's the system that at First Nations University uses now, the orthography that the university uses. So that's where I started to learn to read and write in that orthography. And I started really thinking about what I was going to do. But I was still young, and I maybe wasn't so as focused as I would like to have been, but that's where my career started off after getting my undergrad degree from there. Years later, after teaching at Paskwa Education Center, I went back for my Master of Education. It took me about 4 years to do that. I went thesis route, so and my thesis is all about language revitalization. I will get into that more so during the presentation. And I am in the future because I just attained my Master of Education just recently. So So this is where I work. I work at Paskwa. I work on my reserve. As an Indigenous person, when you are successful in something, and when your First Nation um, supports you in that way, it's our way as Indigenous researchers, as Indigenous academics, to give back. That is actually an Indigenous research methodology. Once you're successful in your academics or in your goals, you give back what you learned to your community. So I've been giving back to my community since I've started my profession. In the fall of 2008, I walked into Paskwa Education Center with my undergrad degree, Indigenous Studies and Sociolinguistics Studies. And I went in there and I started teaching Soto. And I must let you know, I'm a second language learner. So even though Soto should be my first language, I grew up with the English language. So I brought the language back to our school through second language learning. So I just knew how to read and write it from First Nation University. So I've been teaching at Pasqua Education for approximately 13 years, give or take. I teach from kindergarten up into grade 12 now. So when I started, I was only teaching the elementary grades. Now I'm teaching the high school grades. So I can go from singing nursery rhymes to teaching orthography within the same morning. So it's quite the experience, but today I'm used to it. So I just love it. It's what I'm supposed to do. I believe that's what I'm supposed to do. When I first walked in there, I was afraid, I was scared because it was something new, but 13 years later, it's fun and it's rewarding. So my workspace. So when I first started at Pasqua Education Center, I didn't have my own workspace. I carried my books and I carried my bag and I went from classroom to classroom, from kindergarten to grade 8. So I was transitioning from classroom to classroom every day with my material. I know some language instructors have the little cart they go with. I didn't have a cart. I just did what I needed to do. So I didn't have my own space. I may have had my own little area to keep my stuff, but that was about it. Eventually, I got my own space. And this is right here in the center. This is my classroom. This is where I teach. So the students come to me now, and I'm able to have my resources there if I need resources. Before COVID hit, I actually didn't use the tables. I pushed the tables back, and my teaching style is I had the chairs in a U shape. So we didn't use tables, we didn't use paper, we didn't use pen. It was all verbal and action, TPR. But since COVID hit, we had to use the tables and use the plexiglass so the students didn't have much contact with one another. So it made my teaching style a little bit harder, but it still worked. As teachers, you make things work. And then in the summer and springtime, I do have an outdoor class, and it's behind the school, and I just got some steps. So this is when because of COVID, I actually like my outdoor classroom because I was able to use that that seating arrangement that I had in my indoor classroom. And so this is my outdoor classroom. There's some students there. They're still, and this was the beginning of this year actually. So this is my space. Sometimes I still do go into the classrooms, but it's nice to have your own area with your own resources there. You're not just kind of crammed into the corner somewhere. So yeah, that is my workspace. And my duties are to teach kindergarten right up into grade 12. This semester I'm teaching kindergarten to grade 11. So next semester, which is starting shortly here, I'll be teaching grade 12s. So, and currently we're online, so we're teaching virtually to the students until, of course, the variant calms down a little bit. We're hoping. So my duties is just to teach them the language the best way we know how. And I try to implement different teaching styles for the students because, of course, we all have, what I tell the students is we all have English eyes on. We learn by seeing and reading in English. So I use different methods of teaching to get away from that. So, but I will get into that or a little bit later, maybe next slide, I'm not sure. But yes, I am teaching kindergarten to grade 11 right now. Next semester, I will be teaching grade 12. My grade 10s, 11 and 12s do get a credit for taking this class. So, okay, so this is some of my resources that I use. Machi Anishinaabe Moen is one of the textbooks that I may use for my higher grades. It has a lot of the orthography in there. And this book over here is a dialogue, a dialogue book. So I just fill those in with the students when the appropriate time comes for whichever dialogue. So if we're learning about, if we're doing making soup, then we'll work on that dialogue. We'll look through the book and find that dialogue about the soup, making soup or making pakwaijikan, so I do still use some of these resources just to help me. If not, it comes from my brain or from my human resources. I also use puppets for my younger students. Sometimes my older students like puppets too, but this is Noko Miss. I use her for my younger students, and she helps me to teach. And the puppets keep the Noko Miss keeps the students more engaged for longer periods of time when we're virtual, when we're online. So the younger students' attention span is a lot less. So it's a little bit more so when we're virtual. So Noko Miss keeps them in tune and keeps them engaged. So that's me finding different ways to keep the students engaged. I don't normally work with puppets, but I started last year because I needed to find something that kept my students engaged when we were online. In my classroom, I have a lot of these I guess you can see kind of artifacts. They're a mimic of them, just to show like how how our people, our ancestors, our grandparents used to do things in the past. So I have an artifact corner in my classroom that I use for teaching. And this is just a little bit of it. Like I have a whole wall of it. So again, I'm using a lot of hands-on things. The books here, those are my own resources. The students don't use them. We use the hand-on things for their learning. Sorry, my throat is. This is a part of ASLA, it's called Accelerated Second Learning. Accelerated Second Learning Acceleration. So that's when we use I have tons of these pictures, and we use them for teaching. It's another teaching tool for the students. I'm currently using this with my grade 10s. It's hard for me to use them with the elementary because I don't get them every single day. ASLA is used when you get to see your students every day. So I'm currently using this teaching tool with my grade 10s, and it's a lot of words. It's a lot of listening and understanding for each unit. But my grade 10s, the ones that are there every single day, do know a lot of the language now just by using ASLA. And when you're using ASLA, you're using TPR, which is total physical response. You're using your body to learn. You're using repetition. That's like your days of the week, your calendar, your weather. You're doing that every single day. And you're using the pictures. You're using the pictures to remember and to make sentences. So how it works is you learn the word, and then through the card, you'll learn the verb or the noun through the card. And then through TPR, you'll learn the action. And then just through seeing and memorizing, you'll learn like another piece of the sentence. And at the end of the unit, you put the sentences together. Excuse me. So now my students are I can write a sentence in English, and they're able to translate it into Soto just by reading English. Or I can write it in Soto and they can translate it into English, and they do it quite quickly. So I'm very proud of them. So this teaching tool works. As long as you're doing it properly and precisely, it works and the students learn. So it's absolutely great for them if you get to be with them every single day. And so I was very fortunate to learn how to use this. I believe FHQ did a presentation or got somebody to come in. And so that's where I was introduced to that. So it was really good. It's a really good teaching tool. So, and this is a part of that. I got a TPR, Total Physical Response Training Level 1 certificate. And I believe FHQ brought this into their facility, and they got the language teachers to come in, and we worked on this for a few days. And we received a certificate for that. So as a language teacher, you're continuously learning, you're constantly learning, you're looking for different ways of bringing the language out and being able to teach the language. And the reason why we're doing that, why we're constantly looking for different ways of teaching the language, is because, of course, we're in the school setting. We're not at home where we can use it every single day, all day long. So we have to look for different ways for the students to retain the language. So it's different than teaching at home, where it's natural. This is syllabics. In the higher grades, we learn a little bit of syllabics. I don't get too in depth with it, but I do introduce the syllabics to them, and they tend to like it. But I'm not making it. I'm not focusing too much on the syllabics just yet, because I'm trying to get them to retain the oral stuff first. So, but I do try to show them what is out there. So yes, that's some of the resources. And my biggest resources, I have so many other elders that I work with, I just couldn't get their pictures. But my biggest resources are my elders, are the elders that I work with. This is my mom and my auntie. So my mom is probably my biggest resource there is. When I'm stuck on something, when I need ideas, if I need a word or a phrase, I run to my mother. And and our elders are our biggest resources. And I've always said it that our elders are knowledge keepers, our lodge keepers are our professionals in Anishinaabe life. And us as teachers, we're just the facilitators. And I truly believe that, and I live by that. So I've worked with many different elders from Paskwa and from Muscopeding, and you learn to appreciate your elders. You will learn to appreciate what they have. They hold a lot of knowledge in them. And unfortunately, a lot of the elders that I have worked with, mostly from Muscopeding, they have left. So when that happens, it's scary, and it's scary for language keepers. It's scary for people that are working in the language and culture field, because when our elders leave, they take all that knowledge with them. So we need to start utilizing our elders and taking in their knowledge the best way we can, because once they're gone, that is a huge, huge loss for our people and for our learners and for our language and for our culture. So Kitchenishinaabe, that's how we say our elders. That's one way of saying our elders in Minnesota language. So that the elders are always my guides, and they're my biggest resources. So they guide me. And like I said, our elders, our knowledge keepers, our lodge keepers are the true professionals in Anishinaabe life. Us as teachers, we're just the facilitators. We facilitate what they teach us. So they said that it was asked, what's the best reward of my profession? The best reward is like probably what I was speaking about when I was talking about ASLA, learning, is when your students understand it, when your students get it, when your students want to speak it, when they're happy to speak it, when they get happy when they understand what they're saying or what they're reading. That's the biggest reward. When your students respond to you, even maybe they respond incorrectly, but they're still trying. Our languages are so fragile right now that a lot of people are afraid to speak their language because they're afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid to pronounce things wrong. Where I'm trying to teach students that it's okay to make mistakes. As long as you're trying, that's a big step for a lot of our people, is to open up and to speak their language and not be afraid to make mistakes, not be afraid to pronounce differently. And I think that might be the upside of being a second language learner and then teaching the language, is that you understand that. is that you understand it's okay to make mistakes as long as you're trying. So that's probably the biggest reward of all, is the students understanding, is that the students responding and not giving up. When they're happy they understand, when they're happy they can speak it. That is the biggest reward. It's my job. And for my adult learners, it's the same thing. I teach them the same way as I teach my elementary students or my high school students. Challenges is the time restraints. When we're actually in the school setting, it is the time restraints, and that our language is taught like it's another subject. You have 45 minutes with this class, and then you move on to the next class, and then you move on to the next class. That's my perspective, but from the student's perspective, okay, we have language class now. It's for 45 minutes. We'll speak the language. We'll do things about our culture. And then I'm going to go on to math and I'm going to forget about it. So that's the biggest challenge, is having that, the time restraints and not being able to be with the students all the time. We're constantly shifting schedules and moving on to different subjects and whatnot. And now that we're virtual, I only get my elementary students once a week. And that's just the way it is, because we can't keep the students on all day, every day on the computer. So that's nobody's fault. That's just how schedules go. And we know how, and we all know how schedules are. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is that schedule. And then of course, English dominance. English is everywhere. So once the students leave the classroom, they're back to ELA, they're back to math, they're back to gym, and those things are taught in SOTO. So those are my biggest challenges, is English dominance and time restraints. I'm just gonna see, okay. So I'll probably get into the English dominance part a little bit later again. So we'll just skip back to that. Okay, so in my community, I made this slide saying I am a teacher. So I'm very fortunate to work in my community where Paskwa Education Center and Pasqua First Nation recognizes that I'm a teacher and not a language instructor. So sometimes language instructors don't get paid the same grade as a teacher does, but Paskwa Education Center actually recognizes that I am a teacher and that I should be paid accordingly. So I'm on the, I don't know, I get paid decent. So, and my benefits are the same as a teacher. Holidays are the same as my school holidays are the same as a teacher. So I'm on a salary, a yearly salary. My work hours are from 8:30 to 4 p.m. in the school, but you're constantly working. I work evenings, I work weekends, getting resources together and whatnot. And because there is hardly any sort of resources there, we create a lot of our own resources that fit into our students' learning. So we're constantly working, just like any other teacher. We're constantly working. So our day doesn't end at 4 p.m. It ends at 4 p.m. in the school sometimes, but we're constantly working. Also, being a language teacher, I have side contracts. Maybe I'm teaching an adult class for the community. Maybe I'm teaching an adult class in another community or for different business. Like I've had site contracts for Pasqua, I've had site contracts for FHQ, I've had site contracts for the, what is that called? It's in the city. It's some kind of, it's a center in the cities where I taught adults, some children. So people are constantly looking for language instructors, language teachers outside of the school setting. So we're always busy if we choose to be. So our professional development, I've talked a little bit about the professional development. So like I said, I went to First Nations University to learn to read and write in standard Roman orthography. So that was my professional development, and where my career started was through First Nations University, getting that Bachelor of Arts in Indigenous Studies and Soto-Linguistics, learning to read and write. And this is SICC, that's where I learned ASLA, Accelerated Second Language Acquisition. And it's such a good teaching tool. It really is, as long as it's done properly. SICC, the TPR level training 1. So I'm certified in that. And there's a second level that I would love to take. I actually kind of just study it on my own. So I know a little bit of it, but I didn't take the training. So I just went ahead and tried to teach myself it. And then, like I said earlier, I went back to University of Regina to get my Master's of Education in Instruction and Curriculum. And the focus with that was on language revitalization. So I went thesis route. And the reason why I did that is when you become a language teacher, you're constantly how could I say it? You're always trying to find different ways to teach. You're always trying to find different ways to get yourself out there, to get the importance of language revitalization out there. And sometimes you're not looked at as much as somebody else if you're just teaching the language. Even though people say it's important, sometimes it's not treated as important as people say it is. So I figured, well, maybe in the academic world, I need to hire my education. I need to show people how important it is and how involved I am in it. And maybe I need to go and get a higher education in it. So that's why I went and got my Master's of Education with the focus on Indigenous language revitalization. I needed to get the importance out there. I needed to get that it's not just a job for me to do at Paskwa Education Center. This is important not only for our people, not only for my students, but for everyone's students, for all of our students, for all of Indigenous people. Our language is important. So that was probably one of the reasons why I went and got that Master's of Education. The other reason was one of my students came up to me and she said, you know what, I was talking Soto at home, but because my parents didn't understand it, they told me don't speak it. And that kind of broke my heart. And I was like, well, you keep speaking it. And that's what I mean. Like, our languages are so fragile. Sometimes people are scared of them because they don't understand it, because they don't want to speak it, because they don't understand it. And so that's kind of why I went and I did my thesis. My thesis is about getting your language in the home, learning your language, starting to learn your language in a home. Yes, you can learn it at the school. That's great, but it needs to start at home. So at my thesis, it gives tools for parents, for families to be able to start learning their language within their own walls. And it will take a lot of time, but like I said, any small start is a progress. It's a success, and we as Indigenous people need to start realizing that as long as you're trying, that's a success and that's progress. So that's why I went and to get my master's of education, to show families that you can do this. You can start it in your own home. Maybe you don't have the fluent speakers in your home, but in my thesis, there's tools there that you can use where you don't need a fluent speaker. And it's a more attainable goals, small goals that are in that thesis that our families can use. So that's why I went back to school. And it was because of my students saying that. It was to get my voice out there. It was to show the importance of our languages, but it was also because my student came and said, well, my parents don't understand it, so I can't speak it at home. Or they'd rather me not. And this was probably about 5 years ago that this was told to me. And I said, something has to change. And that's why I came up with my thesis, is to give families a little bit of hope. If they do look at my thesis, if they do choose to read it, there is tools in there for them to start language learning in their own home with their own children, with themselves. So that's where that professional development came from, is my student. So and then language conferences, language keepers in Saskatoon, honoring our language, just learning from other language keepers, knowledge keepers, constantly learning different ways. My choice, so I did a lot of different professional developments, like growing up, we learned the swing teachings, small stick teachings, the belly button teachings naturally in our home. I did anyway. My parents taught me those just naturally. They didn't say, okay, here's today's lesson, we're going to learn about the belly button. It was done naturally, just as the language. But I'm not realizing my students didn't know a lot of those teachings. So I went and I learned, even though I knew them from my parents teaching me naturally, I needed to learn how to do it in a teaching setting, in a classroom setting. So I went into workshops where they taught those, and where I was able to present them in that way to the students. Excuse me. Painting, I'm not a painter, but I learned how to paint a little bit, and that's again another way to bring the language into painting and into arts. Thinking about those students that love art, but still getting the language in there somehow. Cooking with the language, I learned how to incorporate the language into cooking when we were virtual. In person, it was a lot easier, but I went to a language camp virtually from Ontario, and that's where they taught me how to do cooking classes with your students, to do beading classes and making moccasins with the students. I learned that all virtually last year, and I applied them into my high school. I did that with my high school students last year. So we made up moccasins online, we beaded online, and I implemented language with that. Even though it was online, we still did it. That's how I learned it a few months before, and so I took it to my students right away. So the way I teach, when I do my professional development, I learn it and I teach it right away. Sometimes I don't master it, but I learn what I teach what I learned. like almost instantly, so I don't forget it. So when that happens, I tell my students, I'm basically learning with you guys because I just learned this, but now I'm teaching you. And I'm very honest with my students. I don't sit there and say, nope, that's not right. No, this is how it has to be done. I'm like, let's do this together, you know. So that's a lot of my teaching style. And COVID taught me that you do what you got to do, you know, and it was really successful. A lot of a few of my grade 11s, I didn't have much, but they know how to make moccasins now. And they know how to bead. Some of them didn't get the beading too much, but a lot of them did. So they know how to bead, and we've done this all virtually. And that's my choices of professional development. I had to go and learn it, and then I went and taught it like almost instantly. And just the basic teachings that we learned from home, I had to learn how to teach them virtually also, or to teach them in a classroom setting. So I went and did that too, because they don't live with me. Okay, sorry, excuse me. So opportunities in my field. Now that I got my Master's of Education, I guess this is where when I was talking about recognition, hearing language teachers' voices. When you get that higher level of education, Western academics, doors open for you a little bit. So I am now teaching a 101 class for the First Nations University of Canada. So I have about 24 adult students in there. And like I said earlier, I teach them the same way I teach my elementary and my high school students. I don't expect them to know more. I don't expect them to know less. I teach them the same way because our language, again, is in the same situation. It's very fragile. It's very nerve-wracking for some of my students. And whether they're adults or whether they're high school or whether they're elementary. So I teach them the same way. And I spend hours making different teaching styles so they retain it, so they understand it. And just the other day, one of my adult students came back to me on her own time and she asked, how am I doing my fluency? Am I doing it in front of class? I said, no, you don't have to do it in front of class. You could do it on your own. And this is how I treat my high school and elementary. I don't force them to do stuff they're not ready to do. I don't force them to do stuff in front of people until they're ready. Because like I said, I teach our language is very fragile and I don't want to scare people away from learning their language. I want to keep them there. But I also am going to encourage them to open up a bit. So opportunities in the field, you do get your side contracts. And now I'm teaching at First Nations University. And honestly, it's not really any different than teaching my high school students because I teach them the same way. They may have a little bit different curriculum to follow, but the teaching tools and the teaching style is still there so they can understand and so they can learn. And it's not just about learning to read and write. They're pronouncing things, they're saying things. So that's probably the difference. So article writing, I am currently writing an article for the education magazine at University of Virginia. So our first draft is actually due next week. So what I'm doing with that article is I'm just condensing my thesis. I'm just making it smaller. I'm making my 100-page thesis into a 20-page article. So that way, when people want to learn different teaching tools for taking the languages back into their homes, they can read a 20-page piece rather than my 100-page piece. So that's a part of the opportunities, is to be able to write, to be able to get those teaching tools and those different language learning styles out into the communities and out into the world to whoever wants to learn it. And again, this is all with the Soto perspective, the Nakwewen perspective. We don't have enough resources out there. There's a lot of Cree resources, there's a lot of other language resources, but there's hardly any in Anishinaabe. So Anishinaabemowin. So that's a good opportunity. So is to get those articles, to get those pieces out there. So this is my first article. I eventually will keep writing as my more info comes. So like I said, what I learned, I put out there. Language is important. My work is never done, like I said. It's never ever done. We're constantly working, continuously working, because it's never done. It's out. It's language revitalization, language retention. It's hard work. It's lots of work, but it's rewarding. My family was a part of my thesis, so even though the writing part, I kind of had to ignore my family a bit, but the research itself was in my family. They realized that language is important, and that's my job. So our language is a part of my family. It always has been. So my name, like I said, Denise Kennedy, Pasqua First Nation. My email's there. My phone number, my work phone number is there, and my cell number. So if anyone has any questions outside of this platform or anything that you need, please feel free to contact me. I'm open.
Thank you so much, Denise. You know, I've always believed that if when you're working in a job that you truly love, it's really not work at all. And I believe that, you know, that's exactly what you've shown in this presentation. And you are such a positive role model. And I think the demonstration of your professional growth that you've accomplished has only added to the strength of your character. And I commend you for, you know, for what you are doing right now. And I'm just, it's just, you've done a wonderful presentation for us. So thank you. I'm trying to, you know, you covered so many areas of your career, and you know, COVID has set back a lot of people, a lot of students. You know, we're all in the education business right now, but you know what you've done to keep your students engaged. I'm a former elementary teacher, so I know what it's like to try to keep little ones, you know, focused and stuff, and it hasn't been easy the last 2 years, and that's just awesome. I will open it up to questions from the program facilitators if there's anything more they would like to find out from you.
Sure.
Kevin here, just well done. Just a comment more than a question. I think we just need more people like yourself. It's probably there's so many students to reach, and sometimes with languages, it's just not enough instructors of languages that are not English, and that's kudos to you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
And we appreciate that you've added, you know, your contact information too, because I think it's important for students to know that they can reach out to you. A question about the language instructor itself. You know, I don't know if this is even a fair question, but how many language instructors would there be in, you know, that are promoting and building your culture and bringing back that traditional voice? You know, are we moving in the right direction, I guess is what I'm asking. Is how do you see the next few years developing or opening up?
I think we are moving in the right direction. People are seeing, they're starting to see, more communities are starting to see the need for the language, and and like I said, that language can be very touching, it can be scary, but people are coming out of their shells, and they're starting to realize that this is a need. So I think we are moving in the right direction. It might be slow, but we're still moving in the right direction. So I know for my community, there is one other lady that is finishing her education degree with the intent to teach Indigenous languages. So I'm not sure if she's planning on coming to Pasqua or if she's staying in the city, but there you go. That just shows that there are more teachers that are wanting to teach that language. They're seeing the importance of it, the language and culture, in their teaching.
And that's awesome. I think, like you said, slow and steady sometimes wins that race, right? And
Yes.
the momentum is going to grow, and I think that's very important. So thank you for taking charge of this part of of your culture, and just bringing that piece to your students, and for all students too. It's not just First Nation students, right? It's
For sure.
It's open to everyone. So are there any other questions right now before we end this recording?
Yes, Sharon Aniquette here. So Denise, on behalf of File Hills Capel Tribal Council and through our partnership with RIDEC, I say Chi Miigwech for doing a spotlight today. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. It was wonderful. And I commend you and your school and your community for making language instruction and acquisition a priority. I love that you have your own space in the school. That shows that it is very important.
Yes.
A question that I do have though is, how do you ensure that language is prevalent throughout the school?
I'm just everyone should know it. so I'm making sure that our schedules are there. I'm constantly asking, how is this going to work? How is this going to work? When do I do this? How do I do this? And it does totally make a big difference when you have a supportive admin team. And it's such a huge difference. I've been at the school for 13 years, and I tell you, like, these past few years, I've had such a great support system that my position in the school is not even questioned. So, like, as long as you have a very supportive admin team, you're fine. You will be fine. I do try and help the teachers, the classroom teachers, with different teachings. If they have questions or whatnot, they ask me. If I don't know, I'll ask an elder, but trying to help classroom teachers also, and encouraging them to use the language and whatnot. So.
Yeah, I have been in your school, and I did notice, and I was very happy to see that there is signage in the language throughout the building. Yeah, so
yeah,
you just answered my. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. That's also a part of my thesis, and that's what we call linguistic landscape theory. So if you see the language, you're going to speak the language. You're going to recognize it. So that's
that was my second question too. If the staff are encouraged to use the language throughout the day. Yeah,
they are. Actually, that was one of our principal's questions last week or the beginning of this week. How are we going to implement language in our classrooms? So our teachers have to think about that and give answers. So it's definitely there. That support is there and that importance is there. So it makes life easier for a language teacher when you have that tremendous support.
That's so awesome, and I congratulate you. Thank you.
Okay, I think on that note then, again, on behalf of RDIC, Denise, we would also like to thank you for the time that you've spent with us this morning. We know that this information is going to be well received with our students, and there are definitely going to be lots of takeaways for them to consider potentially, you know, this as a career as well. So thank you again, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.